been another week, and it's been a crazy week here in Canada with the continuation of the Freedom Convoy. And I tell you, I almost completely gave up on my YouTube channel because of the backlash I got from last week's video. One of my long-term subscribers, who I sort of consider a hallucinatory friend, him and I engaged in a dialogue which went from, I guess, logical to tinfoil hat territory, when he suggested that the vaccines were actually being used to soften us up for a future variant in order to wipe out large segments of the population. Now, why any government would want to do that, particularly in Canada where we have a healthcare system to worry about, is beyond me. Machiavellian, yes, I'm sure Machiavellian things exist. I'm sure that there are many things we don't know about. My cat keeps yowling at the door because he wants to come in. I've got all these wires and cables and things in here, and of course I don't like the cats going behind stuff and everything, and it's like this mystery room that I'm in because the cats aren't allowed in it. So I assumed that I would lose a whole bunch of subs from this, and to my great shock and disbelief, I actually gained a few. So I guess the thing is that no publicity is bad publicity, I suppose. Now, Hambone and I remain good friends, at least good hallucinatory or imaginary friends, as whoever you'd like to put it. And of course, Hambone got permission to use the clips from my show, from last week's show, and man, he was vicious. I never considered myself a limp-dicked lefty before, so I really don't have any desire to get into an internet feud with Hambone, because I've known him for years, literally years. And what I have come to realize about Hambone is that he's a miserable son of a bitch. And there are things I like about him, of course, but when you're on the receiving end of it, it's not so much fun. Has amassed the support of groups broadly opposed to public health measures in general, with some even calling for a Canadian version of the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol.
Okay, there you go again, Veg, with your smug little smirk on your little limp dick lefty face. Look at your fucking little, looking down your nose. You're looking down your nose. You think you're looking down your nose at fucking me, brother. You ain't looking down your nose at me. Anybody making that jumping that shark deserves your fucking snobby ass, little snotty looking down your fucking nose. Look at that fucking smirk on your face, brother.
Now I realize that I am a fairly thin-skinned person, and we agreed to disagree. I mean, we talked on the phone, and Hambone was a little bit enjoying a few tequilas, I think, a few margaritas, that special Hambone drink that I guess you get really buzzed on, because he was pretty buzzed when he was talking to me. But we agreed that possibly this summer I could meet Sandy and him down at Niagara Falls, which is really not a very far drive from where I live. But I have to cross into Mordor, so that's kind of scary. I haven't been south of the border for a while, and hopefully I won't get shot. I found myself on the receiving end of a lot of backlash over my last video. Hambone ran part of it on his channel, and of course selectively edited clips, had an argument with Deb Ozarko. Now, I totally understand where people are coming from on this. I try and look at both sides of the issue. I think this is going to be the year we see the end of the pandemic. I have it, I can't explain it. It's just a feeling I have that this thing will have played itself out by the end of this year. I'm hoping anyway. But back to the truckers' freedom convoy. This is being organized largely from south of the border. That's where most of the money is coming from, and from all kinds of right-wing groups. Meanwhile, these characters, there was about 250 of them after the weekend that decided to stay in downtown Ottawa and make residents' life a living hell. I have a sister that lives in downtown Ottawa who had to leave town because freedom. Yeah, you lock down a city, prevent emergency workers from doing their jobs. One EMS attendant posted on Twitter that because of this freedom protest, they had a fatality because they couldn't get to the hospital on time. They had to pass through various roadblocks. I understand the fear of mandates, and it goes against a lot of things that people that believe in freedom and self-sufficiency, etc., etc. But I'm trying to explain that these protests had so little to do with mandates. One of the lead speakers at the event last weekend is quite familiar to me. He runs a little evangelical church in a town called Aylmer, not very far from here, probably about a 30-minute drive. And this guy made the local news because he refused to obey the law because God, told him not to or something. And during the lockdown, kept holding services and everything. Now, the women all dress like, I don't know, like it's the 19th century or something. And this guy is a character and got in trouble with the law several times. He is a local idiot. And of course, he was one of the main speakers. Trudeau, I don't hate. One of the greatest things that Trudeau did was legalize weed in Canada. And for all those who talk about freedom and want the Conservatives back, we've had some right-wing governments in the past that have not served our country well, that have not done the right thing, that have increased the income disparity in our society. A lot of people are freaking out because of the number of immigrants, so they're scary people because they have dark skin and they speak funny. And people worry about, and this is much like in the U.S., I'm sure, but it's probably a little more in Canada because these people really hate Trudeau for allowing a lot of refugees in from Muslim countries and people that don't look like Canadians, whatever that is. The only people that look like Canadians are Indigenous people, First Nations people. The rest of us are all just mongrels from somewhere else, and I have no problem with our society becoming more diverse, and why worry about it? It's not affecting anybody in any big way, in spite of them saying they're coming for our jobs. One thing that we have here in Canada is a lot of room and a lot of resources, and not a whole lot of people. Still fairly sparsely populated, particularly in northern areas. Most of the population is strung out along the border. My sister sent me a picture that I had totally forgotten about that was hilarious, and it came from about, I guess one of them was from the 70s, and I had my little Triumph Spitfire behind me, and my wife of many, many years. And I started to think about how different society was in the 70s than now. There weren't the big divisions and the big problems that we're facing. And of course, they're getting exponentially worse as we move into the 21st century. And I was thinking, how did we manage back then to think that everything would stay sane? We didn't realize at the time what was coming. In 1980, Turk came around, and now everything seemed to go downhill in one big jump. And I trace it back to the advent of Reaganism and supply side economics, and of course what this really meant was reduction in living standards for the next 40 years, but done in increments so that we would not notice that. We all tend to look at the past through somewhat rose-colored glasses. For me, looking at old photos made me extremely nostalgic for another time, a simpler time. And I guess it wasn't really a simple time. It wasn't, I mean, I still had my worries and everything. But it seems like my friend T-Bone says, that we're all traumatized and neighbor against neighbor, and it's time to take the temperature down a few degrees and start having some sort of a dialogue. I know it's impossible with some people because they're locked into their positions and they refuse to look at things from the other person's point of view. And this disinformation, of course, is flowing across the internet. This is one thing that I've noticed since the advent of the internet. Is originally it was meant to bring, well, it was supposed to bring us all closer together, and instead it's had quite the opposite effect, and has divided society into warring factions. And I think the thing that upset me about this whole truckers freedom convoy thing is that it's doing the same thing in Canada that Herr Drumpf did in the States. And I'm disgusted when I look at the state of American politics and what's going on down there. And I thought in Canada, the peaceable kingdom, we weren't going to go that way, but it seems like we are. And a lot of this influence and a lot of the money, a lot of the organization came from south of the border, from Trump people. Maybe that makes me a limp-dick liberal because for noticing that the prime motivation for this is to say, fuck Trudeau. Which is, I don't hate the man. I do not hate Trudeau. I have hated some of our former prime ministers way, way more than Justin Trudeau. You see, the hatred of Trudeau goes back a long way, particularly in Alberta and the western provinces. Back during the days of the energy crisis back in the 70s, Trudeau's father, Pierre, who was a great Canadian. He gave us a constitution, he gave us a lot of stuff. And the hatred from Alberta was because during the energy crisis, he nationalized the oil industry. And we never had any lineups up the pumps back in the 70s. We heard about it south of the border, that there was shortages of gasoline, but we had Alberta pumping out what they pump out. Besides right-wing politicians, Alberta pumps out a lot of dirty crude and a lot of, yeah. So this is where this whole motivation comes from, in my opinion. Aside from the tinfoil hat people that say the vaccines are going to kill us all, and I don't know, it's the mark of the beast or whatever. I've heard 15,000 things, and people go, I'm not putting that in my body. One of the members of my family is like that. And there seems to be this acceleration of of it being made into a much bigger deal. I realize people are sick of lockdowns, people are sick of mask wearing, and I have no problem with the mask wearing. The lockdowns were a pain in the ass, and they're being lifted now, hopefully for the last time, because I do have a feeling that this thing has just about played out. And if you look at the Spanish flu epidemic at the beginning of the 20th century, it took a couple of years before things started to level out and get back to normal. And it seems like maybe there will be more variants, but generally the variants become weaker over time and people become immune. I'm hoping that's what happens. I can't tell the future. However, I'm hoping that this will help tone down the complete division that this pandemic has increased in our society. I guess it was always there, bubbling under the surface. Now, being empathetic is not a weakness. In fact, if you're empathetic, you have to be stronger than most people. You have to be able to absorb the slings and arrows that are fired at you from all directions. And if we are to keep love in our hearts, we have to stop fighting each other. And that's never going to happen because human beings don't have it in them to stop fighting with each other. Thus it's always been. Is a new world possible? Theoretically, perhaps, but practically, no. Simply because of who controls the finances, who controls. You have people with so much money that they could never spend it in 5, 6 lifetimes. No matter how, if they spend it, $1 million a day, it's never going to run out. There's no need for it. Beyond numbers that say, my numbers are bigger than your numbers, so I'm more important than you. And it's nothing to do with virtue. It's nothing to do with providing things that are useful to humanity. It's about destruction. It's about, screw you, I've got mine. And this kind of thing has gotten worse, and nobody cares about it. No politician is going to address income inequality. Bernie Sanders, it was feckless. I love Bernie, but honestly, he never had a shot. And what about in California? California Democrats. Now this is mind-blowing. They did not pass Medicare for all. No, complete majority could have done it. Most people want it. It could have been a template for the rest of the country. But big money gets in there and ensures that they don't get it. I mean, nowhere in the world is medical care rationed on the basis of your ability to pay, except the United States. When we put greed in charge, then morality goes out the window. Any sense of empathy for other people is sublimated to making money. And even in business schools, they teach the only thing that matters is the bottom line. There's no ideas about corporate responsibility. We can watch videos of oil flowing into the rainforest. It's everything being burned to produce cattle. And the people that do this somehow morally justify it. There's all kinds of ways that, all kinds of philosophies, they'll twist themselves into knots saying why they're doing it. And I'm employing all these people and everything. They don't question the cost to other human beings, to other animals, to anything. It's just the bottom line that counts. And until we get rid of this way of thinking, nothing will ever change. Anyway, I'm sorry this video was late. I wasn't even going to continue the channel, but I don't know, like a moth to the flame, I'm drawn to the tubular universe, and I would miss it. It's mostly the dialogue with other people that I would miss. So everybody out there, please try and develop empathy. And let's bury the hate. Let's try anyway. Let's make some effort to make the world a better place. It's not a very good place now, but we can perhaps get there somehow. At least make our world, our individual worlds, a better place. And practice kindness. Look after the world. Look after your orbit. Maybe it's like I said to T-Bone. You throw a pebble into the river and watch the ripples come out, and maybe if enough people throw their pebbles of empathy into the water, we can create some ripples and make life a little easier for some creatures, for some people, even if it's not all the big picture. Maybe we can't change the big picture, but we can all change the little picture, and we can all change the way we look at each other. So until next week, this is Veg saying, I love all you people. And love is a word we throw around, but I do. And I care about you. I wish nothing but for the best to all of you. And that's it. Be well, everybody. And I'll see you next week.